You don't know how armor works, and that's okay. Payday 3 doesn't tell you anything about it. Everything you're about to see in this video here was kind of just figured out, so it's not your fault, it's their fault. We're gonna be short and sweet with this one. This is everything about how armor works in Payday 3. Alright, so the first thing I want to go over is how armor fundamentally works. It's a little different than it was in Payday 2 and Payday the Heist. So, when you are shot in Payday 3, you lose about 10% of your armor permanently. It turns red, you probably have seen it before. The rest of that damage is turned into flashing armor, and it's not actually gone yet. You can regenerate it by waiting and just not getting shot. So usually if you get shot by an enemy, you take cover or kill everybody around you, then you can wait and it'll regen that white armor. Or, if you have flashing white armor and you take a hit off of an armor bag, it restores the flashing chunk plus an additional chunk for the armor bag that you hit. Now, once a plate is gone, you actually can't regenerate it, so you have to replenish it from an armor bag. If you're using a 3-plate vest and you've only got 2 plates left, you can't get that 3rd plate back until you hit an armor bag, it's just gone. Now when you're out of armor, all of the damage you take actually goes directly into your health bar, which doesn't last nearly as long in most cases. One little bit of information here as well is that all armor plates have the same value. So if you have the 1-plate vest, we'll call that 100 armor. If you have the 4-plate vest, that's 400 armor. So just because the chunks look smaller in the bar doesn't mean they're actually smaller. They're worth the same amount, it's just scaled down. So because of all of this, taking all of this into account, we want to consider armor to have 2 different playstyles. The first style is going to be to absorb all damage. You're going to want to take the biggest vest you can, probably take an armor bag. Regeneration really doesn't matter on this build. You just want to hide and slowly kill enemies before they kill you. This is probably the style that most people have adapted to in Payday 3, where you don't think as much about regeneration and you just eat plates as you need them and kind of push the objectives without really worrying too much about your armor. You still try to kill enemies before they can deal too much damage to your armor, but it's less of a factor and you don't even try to regenerate at all. The second playstyle is going to be mitigating damage by regeneration. So usually you want to take a smaller vest, so I usually recommend 2 plates or less, and then your objective is to hide after being shot so that you regenerate your armor. One more thing about how armor works is that it actually affects the number of downs you get in the game. So if you take the 4-plate vest, you only get 2 downs, whereas the 1-plate vest gives you 4 downs. The medium ones, 2 and 3, give you 3 downs. So when you're making your builds, you can weigh this into how important is it that I take less downs or have more armor, you know, whatever the case. Let's go over some of the skills that affect armor. Plate Up is a skill that a lot of people are recommending right now. As long as you have grit, you'll regenerate your armor chunk immediately when you pick up ammo. Now, this is really good to a lot of people because they're taking the 4-plate vest, which has that slow regen, and we'll talk about that again a little bit later. We're talking about regen speed right after this, by the way. I wanted to knock skills out first because there are some skills that affect regen speed, so I'd rather you know the skills before we talk about the actual timing for every armor piece. Tank is the really important one for armor, so it increases the regeneration speed of your armor chunks by 20%. You're probably not going to notice this as much on a 4-plate armor vest because it's so long as is that even though it knocks off a couple seconds, it's still so long you're barely going to regenerate anything. With the 1 and 2-plate vests, this is going to make a bigger difference, so keep that in mind. We have Hardy, which as long as you have an armor chunk, you are 50% less affected by stagger, stun, and all that. All those effects that can be really annoying, this is a good one to take to try to mitigate them because you're almost always going to have armor on most builds. I'll mention it quickly. Extra plates gives you 2 more armor bag charges. Just because this is an armor video, we'll talk about the fact that the armor bag gives you armor bag. It doesn't do anything besides that, so if you're not taking an armor bag deployable, there you go, it's not that important. And the last one we have here is Armor Up, which if you take a plate of armor from an armor bag, you actually get 2 plates for the price of 1. This is something that everybody's recommending right now. It's not super necessary once you learn how to use a 1 and 2 plate vest because you're using armor regen instead of just eating more armor. So consider taking this on builds where you take the 4-plate vest, but not when you're using the 1 or 2-plate vest. Obviously not the 1-plate vest because it's just a wasted skill point at that point, but 2 or 3 you can use it, but consider not taking it to save a point. Okay, this is the most important part about armor, honestly. It probably should be at the beginning, but I wanted to talk about how armor worked fundamentally before we got into the more nitty-gritty stuff about it. So we're going to talk about armor regeneration speed versus the plate count. I've got a demonstration here that I'm going to show you. I'm not going to talk over it, just look and see the regeneration speed difference between each of these armors. Let's break down what's happening here. What you're seeing here is armor regeneration without any skills that affect armor. So the 1-plate vest, you regenerate your armor in, what is it, about 4 seconds? I didn't actually look at the times before I did this. It's probably about 4 seconds. I kind of just roughly timed it. Whereas the 4-plate vest takes more like 10 seconds, much longer to regenerate. This is probably why most of you guys think you need to take Plate Up, when in actuality, you might not if you take a smaller vest. What I find interesting here is that a lot of people have been defaulting to the 4-plate vest when playing with the 1 or 2-plate vest actually makes the game play a lot more like Payday 2, which is what I think most of you are probably used to. I know I spent a couple hours on Payday 2 before this one, so playing with 1 and 2-plate vests has been a nice change of pace. Now, also included here is, remember that tank skill that I mentioned earlier, where you get 20% faster regeneration of your armor chunks? This is where that comes into play. So on the 1-plate vest, it takes your armor chunk from about a 4-second recharge down to about 3.2 seconds. And on the 4-plate vest, it takes it from about 10 seconds down to 8 seconds. Now, 8 seconds in the heat of combat is a lot of time to be alone. That's why the 4-plate vest still doesn't seem to regen. Even though everybody has this skill on there, realistically I don't know a single person that has a 4-plate vest but doesn't have a point in tank, and it's still way too long. My recommendation here is try out the 2-plate vest, because that means you'll have about 6 seconds of regen speed, or 4.8 seconds of regen speed depending on if you take the tank skill. You can save a lot of armor by regenerating. This means you can rely less on taking armor bags and having all those plates on backup because you're just regenerating your armor instead of eating more armor when you need more. One more thing I'd like to mention is that there's actually a speed difference depending on what armor you're taking. With a lower plate count armor, you're actually much faster than if you take a higher plate count armor. Here's a demonstration of 1 versus 4. Look at that speed difference. That's insane. If you want to be the objective guy, consider taking less armor. It's worth it. You'll regenerate more too. It's great. I love it. Now, the only thing I have to throw on here at the end is that there's one niche thing to bring up that I found, and that is there are some things that go through your armor and deal directly health damage. Some examples of that are falling, gas grenades, cloakers, and then one you probably didn't know is explosions from the environment. So not grenades that you throw, but like these crappy little red barrel things right here. Explosions will actually damage your armor and your health, and I'm pretty sure it's even, so if it deals 100 damage, it does 50 armor, 50 health. Yeah, that's probably a small bit of information that you may use, I don't know. So in conclusion, here's the TLDR about armor. You lose some of it when you get shot, you can regen the rest of it unless you lose the whole plate. When you're out of armor, you need to restore it with an armor bag. We're pretty sure all plates have the same armor value. So just because I have 1-plate vest and you have 4-plate vest doesn't mean you get more out of an armor bag than I do. There are 2 playstyles for armor, one where you want to just absorb all the damage you take, or one where you want to try to mitigate damage by regenerating it. Consider the damage mitigation one more of the Payday 2 style, where the Payday 3 modern style is to just absorb all the damage. There are various skills that will affect your armor, including tank being the best one, where you'll get 20% more regen. If you're using a lower vest, this can be really important. It's a little less important on the bigger vests, but plate up means you'll get more armor for hitting the armor bag. Regeneration speed is tied to the size of the armor, so the smaller the armor, the faster you regenerate it. As well with that, you move faster the less armor you have on, so if you're trying to rush objectives, you want to take a smaller vest. And then you'll get more downs the smaller your armor is. And then remember, armor isn't the end-all be-all. If you get kicked by a cloaker, armor's useless, so consider trying some builds with smaller armor. I've got the medic bag one that people have been talking about a little bit, so go check that video out. Hopefully this was helpful. If you didn't like it, then I guess dislike the video. I'm probably going to leave a dislike, so check out my Twitch. I learned all this live, so you'll be more caught up on the discoveries because I take a week or two to make videos. I'm really slow, okay?